You're really going to do this, Ruby? My dad bellowed, his face turning red as he slammed his fists on the table. After all I've done for you. Dad, I said evenly, though my heart was pounding. I've been paying your mortgage for the past 4 years. I've done everything I can to help, but I'm not giving you $10,000 to settle a gambling debt. I just can't. His expression twisted into rage. You ungrateful little... He spat, grabbing a glass from the table and hurling it across the room. It shattered against the wall, shards scattering across the floor. I flinched but didn't move. My stepmother, Patricia, appeared in the doorway, her face set in a disapproving frown. Ruby, why can't you just help him out? She said, as though she were asking me to pass the salt. My name is Ruby, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one in my family. I'm 31, single, and have spent most of my adult life working hard to build a stable career in marketing. My dad, Gerald, is the opposite. He's the kind of man who can charm his way out of anything but has no idea how to manage his own life. When my mom passed away a decade ago, he married Patricia within a year. She wasn't the wicked stepmother stereotype, but she never stood up to him either. Together, they created a toxic bubble where Gerald's bad decisions were constantly excused or swept under the rug. And for years I'd played along, paying the bills and keeping the peace. But this was too much. I'm not doing this, I said, standing up and brushing the glass shards from my jeans. I've sacrificed enough for you, and I won't keep enabling your gambling. If you want to fix this, you'll have to figure it out yourself. Gerald's face turned crimson, his anger boiling over. You're selfish, just like your mother was, always thinking about yourself. The mention of my mom hit like a slap, but I didn't let it show. I'm done, I said, turning to Patricia. And you're just as bad for letting this go on. Her lips tightened, but she didn't respond. That night, I packed a bag, my hands shaking as I stuffed clothes and essentials into it. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. As I zipped the bag shut, I glanced at the folder of documents I'd been quietly compiling, proof of Gerald's gambling addiction, bank statements, and the eviction notice I'd been holding on to as a last resort. Tomorrow, they'd see exactly how serious I was. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds of Elena's guest room. She'd taken me in without hesitation, her usual mix of practicality and empathy on full display. So, what's the plan? She asked, as we sipped coffee at her kitchen table. Because if you think they're going to take this lying down, you're kidding yourself. Elena had been my best friend since college, and she knew my dad's antics better than most. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I'm going to serve them the eviction papers and let the legal system handle it. I can't argue with him anymore, Elena. He just turns it into a guilt trip or an explosion. Good, she said firmly. He's been taking advantage of you for years. It's time he faces some consequences. She wasn't wrong. For the past 4 years, I'd been quietly paying my dad's mortgage, putting my own financial goals on hold because he was in a tough spot. At first, I thought I was doing the right thing, helping family, being the dutiful daughter. But the longer it went on, the clearer it became that I was just enabling him. Every time I tried to talk about his gambling, he'd dismiss it with a laugh or shift the blame to Patricia for nagging him too much. And Patricia? She'd just shrug and say, "That's how he is." Last night had been the final straw. The glass shattering against the wall, his shout about how I was just like my mother. It was like a switch flipped. I wasn't going to let him drag me down any further. After breakfast, I opened the folder I'd brought with me and laid out the evidence. Screenshots of text messages where he'd begged me for money, bank statements showing the payments I'd made on his mortgage, and printouts of gambling hotline referrals I'd given him that he'd ignored. Wow, Elena said, flipping through the pages. You've been holding on to this for a while. I didn't want it to come to this, I admitted. But I knew he'd never stop if I didn't have a plan. This way, when he tries to play the victim, I have proof of everything. She nodded approvingly. Smart. So, when are you dropping the hammer? Tonight, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'll leave the papers and evidence on the kitchen counter when I go to grab the rest of my things. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to guilt me back. As I packed my things to head over, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to my dad's chaos. I was taking control. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the knot in my stomach was wound so tightly I could barely breathe. The house looked the same as always. Peeling paint, a sagging porch, the garden overrun with weeds. It struck me how much this house mirrored my dad's life. Neglected, chaotic, but just barely standing. I stepped inside, bracing myself for what I might find. The living room was empty, but the faint sound of the TV murmured from the back den. My dad and Patricia were probably sitting there, watching some mindless show while pretending everything was fine. I moved quickly, heading to my old room to grab the last of my things. The duffel bag I'd left behind was still where I'd stashed it under the bed, and I filled it with the odds and ends I hadn't taken the night before. Photo albums, a few books, my mom's necklace. On my way out, I paused in the kitchen. The counter, usually cluttered with junk mail and coffee cups, now held a neatly stacked pile of documents. The eviction notice, the financial evidence, and a handwritten note. I picked up the note and reread it one last time. Dad, I've spent years helping you, but you've taken it for granted and used my support to fuel your gambling habit. I can't do this anymore. The mortgage is paid off because of me, and now it's time for you to take responsibility for your actions. The papers explain everything. I hope you can find a way to turn things around, but I won't let you drag me down with you anymore. Love, Ruby. My hand trembled as I placed the note back on top of the pile. It wasn't angry or vindictive, just the truth. And for once, I wasn't afraid to speak it. As I turned to leave, I heard the TV click off. My dad's voice boomed from the den. Ruby, is that you? I froze, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to bolt, but I forced myself to take a deep breath and step into the doorway. Yeah, Dad, I just came to grab the rest of my stuff. He looked at me with a mix of suspicion and annoyance. You're not really leaving, are you? Come on, Ruby, you're overreacting. Patricia chimed in from the couch, her tone exasperated. You can't just walk away from family. I'm not walking away, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm setting boundaries. You'll understand when you read the papers. I didn't wait for their response. I walked out the door, the weight lifting with every step. That evening, I sat in Elena's living room, the eviction papers filed and the note left behind. My heart was still racing from the confrontation, or lack of it, really. Walking out of that house without looking back was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but I knew it was the right thing. Elena handed me a cup of tea, sitting down next to me on the couch. How are you feeling? I stared into the steaming cup, searching for an answer. Relieved, I said finally. But also guilty. It's my dad, you know. I keep wondering if I went too far. She gave me a look. Ruby, you've been paying his mortgage for years, and he threw a glass at you when you said no to more money. That's not normal. You didn't go too far. You finally stood up for yourself. I nodded, knowing she was right, but the guilt still lingered. Part of me hoped that leaving the papers and the evidence would force my dad to take a hard look at himself, to finally realize the damage his gambling had caused. But deep down, I wasn't sure he'd ever change. The next morning, my phone buzzed incessantly with texts and calls from my dad. I didn't answer. Instead, I let the messages pile up, each one angrier than the last. What the hell is this, Ruby? Eviction papers? Are you serious? I can't believe you do this to your own father. You think you're better than me? You're just like your mother. That one stung, but I refused to let it break me. By mid-afternoon, Patricia called, her tone dripping with feigned concern. Ruby, this has gone far enough. Your father is devastated. Do you really want to put him through this? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Patricia, I didn't put him through anything. He did this to himself. If you want to help him, you'll encourage him to get help for his gambling problem. But I'm done cleaning up his messes. She sighed heavily. You're being unreasonable. Family is supposed to stick together. No, I said firmly. Family is supposed to respect and support each other. This isn't that. I hung up before she could respond, my hands trembling. The calls and messages only reinforced what I already knew. I couldn't go back. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. And while it was terrifying, it also felt like freedom. By the following day, the messages from my dad had stopped, replaced by silence that felt almost louder than his shouting. But Patricia was persistent. She left voicemails filled with guilt-laden monologues, saying things like, "We don't know how we're going to manage without you," and "You're turning your back on the people who love you." Love. That word hit a nerve. Love didn't throw glasses or demand thousands of dollars without a second thought. Love didn't guilt you into sacrificing everything while offering nothing in return. "Elena," I said that evening as we sat in her living room, "I think I need to block them. I can't keep listening to this." She nodded. "You've done more for them than most people would. Blocking them doesn't make you a bad person. It's about protecting your sanity." I hesitated, my thumb hovering over my phone screen. It felt so final, cutting off the last thread of communication. But when I thought about everything I'd endured, the shouting, the manipulation, the endless excuses, I pressed the button. That night, I went over the documents with Elena again, double-checking that everything was in order. The eviction notice was airtight, and the evidence of my dad's gambling problem painted a clear picture of why this step was necessary. "You've covered all your bases," Elena said, scanning the papers. "If they try to fight this, they don't stand a chance." "Thanks," I said, managing a small smile. "I just wish it didn't have to come to this." "You gave them every chance to change," she reminded me. "This isn't on you, Ruby. It's on them." Her words gave me some comfort, but the weight of the situation still pressed down on me. Even though I knew I was doing the right thing, part of me couldn't shake the sadness of it all. This wasn't just about money. It was about years of hurt and disappointment finally coming to a head. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from the lawyer handling the eviction. "Ruby, I wanted to let you know that your father reached out to us. He's trying to contest the eviction, claiming that he's the rightful owner of the house." I clenched my jaw. "Did he provide any proof?" "No," the lawyer said, "and he doesn't have a leg to stand on. The mortgage was paid off in your name, but I wanted to give you a heads up. This could get messier before it's resolved." "Thanks for letting me know," I said. As I hung up, a new wave of determination surged through me. If my dad wanted a fight, he'd get one. But this time, I wasn't backing down. Over the next week, I focused on gathering every piece of evidence I could to prepare for my father's challenge. Bank statements, text messages, proof of my mortgage payments. It was all there, a clear trail that outlined exactly how much I'd done for him. Elena helped me sort through it all. "Ruby," she said, holding up a particularly damning set of texts where my dad had promised to cut back on gambling if I paid his bills, "this alone shows how manipulative he's been. You've got nothing to worry about." "I know," I said, exhaling slowly, "but it's still exhausting. I can't believe it's come to this. Fighting my own father just to protect myself." "You're not fighting him," she said firmly. "You're standing up for yourself. There's a difference." Later that evening, I received an email from the lawyer handling the eviction. Attached were copies of my dad's challenge to the proceedings, a rambling letter filled with half-truths and outright lies. He claimed I'd only paid the mortgage as a favor, and that he'd always intended to pay me back, though he conveniently provided no evidence of such an arrangement. It was frustrating to read, but also oddly freeing. His letter was desperate, full of holes, and completely unsupported. For the first time, I realized how little power his words held over me when I didn't let them. I replied to the lawyer, attaching additional documentation that refuted every claim in the letter. By the time I hit send, I felt lighter, like I was finally taking control of a situation that had controlled me for far too long. The next morning, the lawyer called with an update. "Ruby, I've reviewed the challenge, and it's baseless. He doesn't have any legal grounds to contest the eviction. We're moving forward as planned. Thank you, I said, relief washing over me. What happens next? The eviction notice will be enforced within the next 30 days, she explained. If he refuses to vacate, law enforcement will get involved. But based on his lack of evidence, I doubt it'll come to that. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, letting the relief sink in. For years, I'd been the one scrambling to fix things, to hold the family together. But now, for the first time, I was the one setting the terms. That evening, I called Elena to share the news. It's finally happening, I said, my voice tinged with both excitement and exhaustion. Damn right it is, she replied. You're taking your life back, Ruby, and it's about time. The day had finally come. I pulled into the driveway, clutching the final eviction paperwork in one hand and my resolve in the other. The house stood there as it always had, but this time it didn't feel like a battle waiting to happen. It felt like closure. I knocked on the door and Patricia answered. Her face fell the moment she saw the papers in my hand. "Oh, Ruby," she said, shaking her head. "Is this really necessary?" "Yes," I said, stepping inside. "It is." My dad was in the living room, sitting in his recliner with the TV remote in one hand and a drink in the other. He glanced up at me, his expression oscillating between annoyance and smugness. "What now?" he grumbled. I dropped the eviction notice on the coffee table in front of him. "This," I said, my voice steady. "You've got 30 days to move out." He picked up the papers, scanning them with a scowl. "You think this means anything?" he sneered, tossing them back onto the table. "I'm your father. You can't just kick me out of my own house." "It's not your house, Dad," I replied. "It hasn't been for years. I've been paying the mortgage, and I have the documents to prove it. The lawyer has already confirmed the eviction is valid." Patricia hovered nearby, wringing her hands. "Ruby, please," she said softly. "We're family. Can't we work something out?" "Family," I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Where was that sense of family when he threw a glass at me? Where was it when he demanded $10,000 to cover his gambling debts? I've done everything I can for you both, and all I've gotten in return is manipulation and disrespect. This ends now. My dad stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he spat. "You're just like your mother, always looking for a way to make me the bad guy." I held his gaze, my hands trembling slightly but my voice unwavering. "This isn't about being better or worse. It's about boundaries. I've let you take advantage of me for years, but I'm done. If you want to stay in this house, you'll have to fight the court, not me." He didn't respond, just sat back down with a bitter laugh. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "No," I said, turning toward the door. "I won't." As I walked out of the house for the last time, a strange sense of peace settled over me. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, it felt like mine. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. I thought my dad or Patricia would launch into another round of frantic calls or try to intimidate me into reversing the eviction. Instead, there was silence. Part of me wondered if they were in denial, thinking I'd change my mind or that the legal process would somehow fall apart. But I knew better. I'd done my homework, covered every detail, and ensured that the law was firmly on my side. One morning, I received an email from the lawyer handling the eviction. "Your father has not filed any formal objections to the notice," she wrote. "If they fail to vacate by the deadline, law enforcement will enforce the eviction." The news brought a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because it confirmed that I was finally free of this toxic cycle, and sadness because deep down, I still wished things had turned out differently. Elena invited me out for lunch to celebrate the progress. "Here's to Ruby, finally setting boundaries and reclaiming her life," she said, raising her glass. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. "It's about time, isn't it?" "You're handling this so much better than I would," she said. If it were me, I'd probably be plastering for sale signs on their lawn just to make a point. That's tempting, I admitted, smiling. But I think the papers do the talking for me. As we ate, Elena leaned forward, her expression turning serious. How are you, though? Really? I paused, considering her question. I feel lighter, I said finally. It's like I've been carrying this weight for so long and now I'm starting to let it go. But it's also bittersweet. They're my family, you know. I wish they'd made different choices. That's on them, Elena said firmly. You've done more than enough. It's okay to let go. As the eviction deadline loomed, I drove by the house one last time. The front porch was cluttered with boxes, a sure sign they were preparing to leave. I didn't stop, didn't linger, I just kept driving. That evening, I received a message from my lawyer confirming that my dad and Patricia had vacated the property. The house is now legally yours to manage as you see fit, she wrote. I stared at the message, a wave of emotions washing over me. For years, that house had been a symbol of sacrifice, guilt, and conflict. Now, it was something else entirely, a clean slate. As I sat in the quiet of my apartment, I realized that for the first time in years, I was truly free. The first morning after the eviction deadline felt surreal. I woke up to the realization that I no longer had to brace myself for a call from my dad or a guilt-ridden message from Patricia. The house, the conflict, the endless demands, it was all behind me now. I sat on the balcony of Elena's apartment with a cup of coffee, staring out at the city skyline. You seem quiet this morning, Elena said, joining me with her own mug. I think it's finally sinking in, I admitted. It's over. They're out of the house. I can move on. Elena smiled, her tone teasing. And here I was thinking you'd throw a party. I laughed, shaking my head. No, not yet. I think I need to just sit with this for a while. It's like I've been in survival mode for so long, I don't know what to do with the calm. Over the next week, I began to reconnect with parts of my life I'd put on hold. I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the time or energy for. I started spending my weekends exploring new hiking trails, breathing in the fresh air and letting myself feel truly present for the first time in years. Elena noticed the change almost immediately. You look lighter, she said one evening as we cooked dinner together. I feel lighter, I replied, realizing it was true. For the first time, I'm not carrying their problems. I'm just me. Good, she said, raising her spatula like a toast. Here's to that. The house was still mine, technically, but I didn't see it as a place to live anymore. It held too many memories, too much baggage. Instead, I decided to put it up for rent. The process was surprisingly cathartic, fixing it up, making decisions about the space, and envisioning someone else finding joy in it. When I handed the keys over to the new tenants, I felt a strange mix of emotions. A touch of sadness for what could have been, but mostly relief and hope for what was ahead. This wasn't just about letting go of a house or a toxic relationship. It was about reclaiming my time, my energy, and my life. As I drove away from the house for the last time, I felt the weight of the past finally lift. A few weeks after the house was rented out, I found myself sitting in a cozy cafe, flipping through photos from my new photography class. I had never realized how much joy I could find in something so simple. For so long, my time and energy had been consumed by my father's demands and the chaos he brought into my life. Now, I was discovering parts of myself I'd almost forgotten existed. Elena joined me, sliding into the seat across from mine with a grin. Look at you, Ruby. Actually smiling. I laughed, setting the photos down. It feels weird, doesn't it? Being happy? It suits you, she said, taking a sip of her coffee. So, what's next on the agenda? World domination? Opening your own photography studio? I rolled my eyes playfully. Nothing that dramatic. Honestly, I think I just want to keep building a life that's mine. No guilt, no pressure, just freedom. Later that evening, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past few months. The eviction, the confrontation, the emotional fallout. It had all felt so overwhelming at the time, like I was wading through quicksand. But now, looking back, I realized how much stronger I'd become because of it. For years, I'd let myself believe that sacrificing for my family was the only way to show love. But love wasn't supposed to feel like an endless obligation, a constant drain on my soul. Love was supposed to build you up, not tear you down. I thought about my dad and Patricia, wondering if they'd learned anything from all this. A part of me hoped they had, but I knew better than to hold my breath. Change wasn't something you could force on people. It had to come from within. As I sat by the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The house was rented out, my boundaries were firmly in place, and my future felt wide open. For so long, I'd been defined by what I did for others, by the sacrifices I made, the burdens I carried. But now, I was finally learning to define myself by what I chose to do for me. I picked up my camera, snapping a quick photo of the city skyline. The image captured more than just the view. It captured a moment of clarity, a reminder of how far I'd come. This was my life now, and for the first time it felt like truly mine.